Welcome to another week of Moving to Lucid, a podcast where we talk about all things that move the body and soul and spirit. And also, as we bring on guests, patients, and advocates that do things for autoimmune disease and especially multiple sclerosis. So here today, we've got a fellow podcaster. We have Mr. Geoff Allix, the podcast host of Overcoming MS. So without further ado, welcome, Geoff, to our podcast.
Hi, glad to be here.
Hi. Glad to have you. So how early is it for you right now, sir?
It's 1 p.m., just after
1
lunch.
p.m. So it's
Yep.
afternoon for you.
Yep.
So you've already had tea and all that.
we, yeah, we don't all drink tea in England.
You
It's
don't
not,
all
it's
drink
not,
tea.
well, it's not enough. A bit more than you do in the US, but
Okay.
yeah. No, yeah, I've had my breakfast, my lunch.
You've already had
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Very good. So now what does a day in the life of your podcast day look like? Do you have podcast interviews today?
No, other than this one, no. Um, no, I mean, I probably have maybe one a week, but they tend to be like grouped up. So I might have like 3 days in a row and then nothing for a few weeks. So we
Okay.
try and get ahead of the game.
Yeah.
Ideally, mostly we're like a couple of months out, but then occasionally someone cancels and
Right,
it's last
right.
minute. But generally, yeah.
You mean you're not in the beginning like me where you're like all of a sudden like, oh shoot, you don't have it ready? You're not like that yet anymore
Not
after 10
yet.
years? And
No,
Overcoming MS is in its 10th year. Is that correct?
that's right. Yeah. So
Okay.
10 years of Overcoming Us. The podcast is now in its fourth season.
Okay.
So
Very good.
not 4 whole years, but yeah, the fourth year of it. Yeah.
So, for those of you who don't know you, Geoff, tell our listeners before diagnosis and stuff, what did you know about multiple sclerosis? How did multiple sclerosis play a part in your life?
So, well, the first thing is my father had multiple sclerosis, and that was a really different time to now. So it it wasn't it wasn't directly. It kind of was because of my father, but he'd left my mother and me and my brother a few years before. So I knew him growing up until I was like 7, completely like typical father, and then he left, and then maybe 3-4 years after that he said he had multiple sclerosis. I didn't know what it was. I was like 10, 11 years old, um, and I didn't notice anything. He was just kind of normal. He changed career, getting less stressful jobs. There were times we couldn't go and visit him because his wife said, "Oh, he's just like not having a good time." He was never he never had mobility issues at all, which I found a bit weird because I was going with the publicly perceived multiple sclerosis, which is someone in a wheelchair.
Right.
Well, it certainly was here and in my mind at that time, and I was like, okay, that's a bit weird. And I knew someone else actually whose father had MS, whose dad was in a wheelchair, and I was like, yeah, that's a
Okay.
bit strange. My dad's not in a wheelchair, but yeah, that's so
Right.
odd. But then yeah, increasingly he would get things like he'd drop things, or he'd like there were sort of odd things like that. But there was no real medication. This was sort of in the sort of 80s, 90s.
Yeah, I was going to ask what year. I'm trying to understand what year that was.
Yeah, so this was sort of yeah, he would have been diagnosed in like late 70s,
Okay.
and then he died in 98.
Wow.
But I mean, they say you don't die of MS, but
Right, right.
equally they say he probably wouldn't have died if he didn't have MS because he
Right.
had
Exactly.
like bladder infections that led
Gotcha.
to other things, and
Right.
and they weren't being diagnosed very well. And I mean, I don't know the full ins and outs, but
How
yeah.
old were you then?
Wow, 28, I think, something like that.
Okay.
27, 28, yeah.
So now by the time he passed, were the two of you close at that time?
Um, yeah, well, I mean, we were always reasonably close. I mean, he lived
Okay.
quite a long way away.
Okay.
Although, yeah, bizarrely, my mother they both moved to Wales. Neither of them are from Wales, and they moved to different
Okay.
bits of Wales. So I would sometimes, I'd visit one and visit the other.
Okay.
And
Gotcha.
so, yeah, I mean, yeah, we were always friendly.
Wow.
Right at the end, though, I think he couldn't communicate at the very end. So I sort of saw him completely fine, and then the next time I saw him, he couldn't really communicate, and then he passed soon after that.
Wow. So that must have been very difficult for you to lose him so young.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been if it was my mother who was like
Yeah.
full-time parent, then it would have been very
Right.
different. So,
Right. For
because he
sure.
wasn't there all the time, and so it was that, yeah. But and there were odd things like I found out when I was actually getting fitted for my wedding suit with my brother. So myself and my brother, who he didn't live in. I lived in London. He lived outside London. So we didn't meet up all the time, but we just happened to
Right.
be just the two of us, and we were getting fitted for wedding suits, and we were having lunch, and then I got a telephone call. So it's just this weird sort of
Oh,
things like there's just
yeah.
we're the two children that he had, so it's like we were happened to be together at the time we got told, and
Right.
things like that.
Wow.
And we both saw him as well just before he died. So in
Really?
between, when he was really not communicating,
Right.
but
Right.
literally just after we independently both saw him, and then literally just
Wow.
after that he died. So it was sort of
Jeez.
like you wonder whether it was a sort of hanging on thing or something.
Yeah, yeah. And they say that so often that you do, that when people pass, they wait until they've seen the people that they're going to see. And
Yeah,
then when they've said their goodbyes, then they feel a sense of peace, like, okay, I can go now. So you
yeah,
do wonder, was he, was your dad waiting till
yeah.
he saw you both?
And
Very
yeah.
interesting.
But then, I mean, and then I had sort of symptoms going way back,
Okay,
but
so you can see
always,
that.
yeah, to when would be the first one? 2000, I think.
Okay, so you're
So
going way
not
ahead, Jeff, now. So I was going to ask you, no, I'm just kidding.
well, yeah,
So
but only like a few years after he passed.
yeah,
Then I
so you were already feeling, so with MS, did you have like any more understanding of when your dad passed of kind of what it was? Would
no,
be okay. So then all of a sudden you start feeling some weird stuff. So what kind of were they stuff that your
I
dad was?
no, not at all. I mean, I lost feeling in all my fingers, all my
Okay.
fingertips, and then I was living in London, and there was a specialist
Okay.
hospital nearby, and I went. So fortunately, I got to see like a top specialist straight away, and he said that's really odd because there's two nerves that go down. Normally, you'd lose feeling in three or two of one hand or the other hand, and he said that's just a bit, it's really unusual. And they did all these tests, they couldn't find anything wrong with me. And then after sort of like 3 or 4 months, it went away, and they went, "Oh, all right, that's fine then." And then I didn't see them again. And then I went away. Next year, we went traveling around Asia, and then it was absolutely fine. And then nothing at all. And it was just like so I just completely didn't think about it because I just thought,
Right.
yeah, okay, that was something weird, and it went
Right.
away, and I was fine. And of course, now you look back and you go, well, it's relapse remitting, isn't it?
Right. Exactly.
It's what happens.
Yeah.
And the thing is, there are countless other things that it could be. So we always
Right.
think, oh, why didn't you just diagnose that as MS?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but it could have been like, and then list sort of 50 other things.
Absolutely. For
So,
sure. It's
um,
difficult when it's just something odd. It's like, okay, well, why didn't they know? It's
yeah,
like, well,
yeah, it could have been all these other things. We couldn't
right.
treat you for that because we would have had to treat you for the other 50 things it could have been.
Right. Exactly.
And then
And this is in what year, Jeff? What
so
year do you think
that
this
was when
is?
lost feeling of my fingers was like 2000.
Okay.
And then nothing really I remember until like about 10 years after that, 12 years after that,
Wow.
something like that. Really,
So it
nothing
was
that I can
really
really pick
quiet.
up. Yeah,
Wow.
and then I had weird things. I ran a marathon, which was fine.
That's
Um,
right. I forgot that you're a runner.
yeah, well, I was. Yeah,
Yeah.
can't run now. Yeah.
I
So
hobble. I call it hobble.
yeah, I can. Yeah. And so I ran a marathon. It was fun. It was only afterwards actually I sort of carried on running, and then I really just massive dizzy spells when I got over hot and over exercise. And I remember one a friend had to drive. I'd driven to, and we ran. I live quite near the sea. We ran along this cliff top run. It was really nice, and then
I
got
bet it's
back.
beautiful.
And I couldn't. I'd driven there, but I couldn't drive back. I just felt. I
Wow.
said, I'm not in a state to drive. I don't know what it is. I must have overdone it on the run.
Yeah.
But I mean, I didn't. It seemed a bit weird because I'd done a lot of running, and I was like,
Right.
okay, I
Right.
know I can push myself, and I
Right.
did push myself a bit, but I was like,
Right.
it wouldn't be this bad. So those sort of things, and then I started to get dropped foot, which I didn't know what it was. I thought it was like muscle strain, back problem,
Right.
all the 101. I kept thinking I had back problems. I saw all sorts of osteopaths and
Right.
chiropractors and things because I kept thinking there was a back issue.
Sure. Yeah,
And
well, who
and
knows that? As run, I did the same thing. I would fall. They'd always tell me that they were going to bubble wrap me, and it just never. I didn't know what drop foot was. It just didn't
no, I
even
didn't
occur to
either.
me.
Yeah, and and then the thing that ultimately sort of through to diagnosis was it was that I had double vision. So I went to an optician,
Uh-huh.
and the optician said, "There's nothing wrong inside your eyeballs." And I'd always had really good vision, and he said, well, there's two things he said. One thing is nothing wrong inside your eyeballs at all. So this is not caused by your eyeballs, but I'm an optician. I only look inside the eyeballs. Something else is happening outside. But he said the other thing is you're in your 40s. You're not going to make it to 50 without needing glasses. And I said, oh, why is that? He said, no one does. Everyone's going to need reading glasses when they hit 50. And he was right. I couldn't believe it at the time. I was like, no, my eyesight's perfect. And then I've got reading glasses now. But
Wow.
so he was
So
right. But then
was it
that from
optic
that.
neuritis or no? Was it double vision or optic neuritis?
No, it's just double vision. And
Okay.
then, and I could, if I was driving, I'd have to close one eye. And then it would sort
Right.
of 10 minutes later, it would be sort itself out and then I'd be okay. And
Yeah.
then that went on for a number of months. But that was what then they said, oh, it's something going on with your brain if it's not your eye. So
Right.
you need to see a neurologist, and then got an MRI,
So that
and
brings us to what year then are we about?
then we're up to what we 2015 or sort of
Okay.
diagnosis
Okay.
time. Yeah.
So that was when you were diagnosed, 2015. They finally do the MRI. Did they do a spinal tap then or just the MRI?
Well, so in the UK we have a fantastic health service that is
Yes, I
free.
know. I
Well, yeah,
know.
yes and no. So I'll tell you the good and the bad things of it. So the good things are that it's free to everyone, which is brilliant. So we
Yes.
don't pay for medication, we don't pay to see the doctor, and that's all brilliant. But there's sometimes very long waits. So
Right.
to get diagnosed with MS would typically take a couple of months, probably all the way
Right.
through. But we also have private healthcare, which a lot of people and companies do. So part of your, as in the States, I know because of my company, we have people in the States as well. So
Right.
you have healthcare packages, that do that. So I thought, well, rather than waiting, I will jump the queue and I will I'd never used my private healthcare insurance before, and I'll use that and I'll
Sure.
find out straight away. So I went private and got an MRI the very next week, and they said, you almost certainly have MS, but there's all these other tests we need to do, and the private companies don't pay for that. You need to go to the National Health Service for that.
Oh no.
Whatever level of cover you've got, it doesn't matter. You need to go to get that through the National Health Service. So then I go to the back of the queue that I thought I was jumping, which I left the queue essentially. I've realised in retrospect what you do is you keep your NHS referral and then
Right. Right.
you run them both at the same time. But anyway,
Oh
so
gosh.
essentially I'd been told very early on that I almost certainly had it, and then waited for all the other tests to come through. Whereas the
Well, the
normal
MS in the
process,
meantime is just like doing its thing in your body and you're
yeah, I mean,
waiting.
it wasn't. Yeah, I wasn't massively active at the time, but in the normal situation, you wouldn't find out until the end. They wouldn't tell
Right.
you when they're like pretty certain. They're not going to tell you, and because
Right.
you get
Exactly.
no resources, you don't get to
Right.
see anyone, you don't get anything, you don't get any device, you don't
Wow.
get any nurse, you don't get any medication because you haven't yet formally got it. So
Right.
then months later, when I then get told, yeah, you definitely have it by the same doctor, the private doctor is the same guy that I now see on the NHS.
Wow.
They do, most of them do both public and private work. It's exactly the same person I see, but
So now
yeah.
medication wise, is it more difficult to get on a different like a DMT that's more accessible in the States?
So we have a system which is called NICE, something for clinical excellence, National Institute of Clinical Excellence, something like that. But they basically assess all the medication, and they work out whether it's good value for money.
Okay.
Now that doesn't mean it has to be cheap. It means that if it's expensive, it's got to be really, really good.
Okay.
So we get less choice than people in the States.
Okay.
But to get onto a very expensive medication, if it's really, really effective, is easier. But there are some things where there's one for spasticity, Amphira, I think it's called,
Okay.
and that's not approved because they just go
Oh.
it's not that expensive,
Right.
but it only works for 20% of the people. So we're not prepared to fund it. So you can't get
Really?
it in the UK.
So like what things you can get in the UK would be like what, like baclofen, things like that for
Yeah,
spasticity?
you can get baclofen, I think, yeah.
Okay.
But but equally, you can get some of the most expensive DMTs. And there's
Right.
no question about, oh, well, how, what funding have you got, what's your
Right.
insurance going to pay, or is there anything like that?
Right.
There's
So like
nothing like that.
Ocrevus and all that,
Yeah,
that would
that's
be
fine,
accessible.
Ocrevus, yeah. So I
Gotcha.
started on Tecfidera, and then that didn't work out. Not that it wasn't working, I didn't have any relapses, but it caused my white blood cell count to go very low, so they took me off that, and then I went on, had Lemtrada infusions.
Okay. How are you doing on that?
Well, bizarrely, that deliberately caused your white blood cell count to go down because it wipes out all your mature white blood,
Medicine, medicine.
and that they haven't rebounded as they should,
Oh
and they
boy.
think that might be affecting my symptoms somewhat because certainly I'm not walking as well. Um, when I was first diagnosed, I was snowboarding. I was pretty active. I could still, go away for the weekend, walk around. I wasn't
Right.
really running. I could run a short way, maybe run a kilometre, 2 kilometres,
Right.
a mile or so.
Okay.
And yeah, so and snowboarding and surfing and stuff like that. So, but now my balance isn't as good as my mobility isn't as good. I certainly wouldn't go snowboarding now.
Right.
So I'm hoping it might. I mean, they're sort of saying, well, maybe when your white blood cell count, if it, hopefully it'll rebound at some point.
Yeah, for sure. And
It's
are
a
they
weird one
hopeful
because
that it will?
you, well, they don't really know. They're not sure, but
What do they know?
not a lot. The problem with Lemtrada is you can't stop taking it. So most people, it works brilliantly. I've met other people who I got to know the people who were in the week and the week after,
Mm.
before and the week after me in hospital
Uh,
because we were giving each other tips about what you should bring and all these things
okay.
and I met one of them by random chance because I never met them physically. I just saw her online, but I just
Right.
met her by chance because I recognised her and she was doing brilliantly. It's like she was just like, it's like I don't have MS. It's brilliant,
Really? And
amazing.
she's on Lemtrada.
Yeah, because you just do it.
Really?
You do infusions 1 year, if you go
Yeah.
back infusions the year after, and that's it. And
See, I
what's
don't know
really
that much
nice,
about it, so this is interesting. That's
yeah,
one medication I don't know much about.
you don't take anything. You have it. It's if it works properly, you have infusions 1 year, infusions the next year, and then that's it. No,
Gotcha.
nothing. And
Wow.
it does feel really nice because I'm not taking any medication.
Right.
Whereas Tecfidera, I could feel it was sort of chemically.
Yeah.
There was like a feeling like something was doing something to me.
Right. Right.
This is not like that, and so that's what's really nice is you don't feel like you're taking anything. But the downside is now if it hasn't worked as it should, there's nothing I can do. I
Wow.
can't stop taking it because I've done it. It's one step below HSCT, the
Okay.
stem cell
Okay.
treatment, which
Gotcha.
that completely wipes your
Right.
blood cells.
Right.
This one wipes all your mature white blood cells.
Okay. Okay.
There's still a form of chemotherapy drug, but it's not as extreme as.
So you're still obviously needing to be very secluded. You can't be around anyone.
Oh yeah, no, I can be around people. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, it's my white blood cell count is at about just over point 0.8. If it's
Okay.
under point 0.8, they get worried, and if it's over point 0.8, they're like,
Okay.
yeah, that's just about
Right.
okay.
You just
But
have to be
normal
masked
people,
up and
yeah, I'm a little bit more cautious, but I've
yeah.
had COVID, and that was not
Yeah.
any worse than anyone else, I don't think.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. I know some of us have had it. I've had it twice, but after the booster. So I'm like, who knows?
Yeah, the same. I
But
had a booster, so yeah.
it's so crazy. But I want to ask you now about overcoming MS. So you find out you're diagnosed. And then so fast forward. So how did you decide, okay, now I want to do a podcast?
So because it took a long time for diagnosis, where I've got no doctors to see, no nurses, nothing at all, then basically what you have is Dr. Google, obviously.
Right, right.
And it was actually my wife I'd found a few things, but there was a lot of people trying to sell you stuff.
Oh yeah.
Like, so then you think, okay, but she said, no, I found these people, and they're not selling you anything. They'll send you a book for free.
Right, right.
I think in the States it's available as an ebook. In the UK and Australia, New Zealand, they actually send you the physical book. And she said it sounds really interesting, and they're not charging anything. I was like, okay, yeah, that sounds good. So I got this book. I basically just read it cover to cover, like solidly through, and thought, okay, this is scientific. It's all massive, like huge number of references at the back. It's like there's thousands of references.
And let the listeners know, what book are you speaking about?
It's the book is called Overcoming Multiple Sclerosis. The sort of charity is almost named after the book. And there's an element, some people say, oh, you never overcome it. It's like, yeah, well, that's kind of the name of the book. So it's like the book was called that because it was how a doctor, certainly for him, sort of overcame most of the symptoms.
Sure.
And I just thought, okay, this makes sense. It's not, it's basically eating a whole food diet, which kind of seems to make sense anyway, and exercise, that's got to make sense. Mindfulness, vitamin D, I'd never heard of that you should take extra vitamin D, but there was a lot of evidence for that. And don't smoke. I was like, okay, And so there's like things that made a lot of sense. So I thought, well, I want to do this. And then I got diagnosed, and then I spoke to my neurologist, and he said, well, there's no proof that lifestyle modification will do anything. However, I would advise this for anyone, because heart disease, it will reduce your risk of heart disease, cancer, diabetes, stroke, countless other Western illnesses. So you don't really want to get cancer when you've got MS. And you don't want to get heart disease when you've got MS. You want to definitely avoid any other things. So if you're prepared to, the big one, because there's no dairy, so it's whole food, plant-based diet, but you're allowed to have any seafood or fish. So it's like, okay, I'm not missing out completely on, I'm not eating red meat, but fish is pretty versatile. I can eat tuna, I can eat, swordfish, all these different fishes. But he said, if you're prepared to not eat cheese, and that was the biggest one, actually, not eating cheese.
Dairy is my hardest. Cheese. I want cheese.
It is a difficult one. Especially in the UK, we're very big into cheese. And so, that was pretty big. But increasingly, and the more I've learned, the more all the different diets or lifestyles say no dairy. So whether it be Matt Embury with the Best Bet diet, whether it be Terry Wiles, whether it be Overcoming MS, they're all saying no dairy.
Yes.
And when you look at the evidence, when you look at all the papers, it's like, okay, dairies. And then you start to think about it. You think, I can't remember, someone said this to me, he said, is it, because in this country it's actually listed as a food group. Dairy is an official food group.
Right.
They say, but no other animal on earth has breast milk as an adult.
Right.
And certainly not from another species.
Exactly.
And that is actually, when you think about it, a little bit weird. Now, if you were to have human breast milk as an adult, you would probably get people questioning you, and you might get in a bit of trouble.
Right. You might have to go to prison for that. I'm not sure.
But actually, that's more normal than if you get it from another species. Well, and if you were to go in a field and start to get it directly from the cow, equally probably end up in prison.
Right. I mean, when you put it like that, it is kind of gross.
It's like kind of weird.
Yeah.
You have dairy.
Then it helps you when you want ice cream just to think, do I really?
Yeah.
You kind of just think about that. That helps. For sure.
So the adult breast milk thing is like, okay, that is a bit weird, and we can't have evolved for that. That's just not normal. Right.
And I like that.
So increasingly you think, okay, and then once you stop, after a while, it kind of starts to, it doesn't appeal anymore. Cheese definitely doesn't appeal to me at all.
Very true. So then you had already started the podcast.
So no, I hadn't started. So I started following the program, and then they, at the time, before the pandemic and everything, they had these retreats, and I thought, I'd started doing it and actually started feeling better. And actually my neurologist said, your symptoms are improving. And he said it must be something to do with lifestyle, because they keep improving. You haven't had a relapse for quite a long time now, but you're slowly getting better. So he said normally you get to a new baseline and that's where you'll stay. But you got to a baseline and then you kept getting a bit better. So he said that a healthy lifestyle has to be, it's good. So keep doing it. It's working really well. I was like, okay, that's really good. And then they asked for a podcast host, and I do a lot of audio video stuff. for my job, and so I thought, yeah, okay, I can do that. I do a lot of stuff in front of camera, so I applied and then got interviewed, even though it's like, okay, it's a voluntary, non-paid role, and I was like, oh wow, I'm going to be interviewed, and then unfortunately got it, and then they had a retreat before I did any episodes. They had a retreat which I then went on. And that really, really was just meeting other people who were following it, because I'd never really met anyone. I met one other person who was really, who had MS, and there was, and just having that community and getting to know people, and then I thought, yeah, okay, there's a lot of people in there, and it's turned some people's lives around really drastically, and so I thought, yeah, and I just wanted to, I thought I'm feeling better, and I want to give something back, so I wanted to do the podcast for that, really.
And so you have been doing it now for yourself. How many years?
So it's about, it must be getting on for 4 years now, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
About that.
So,
yeah. 100 episodes. We've done 100 episodes.
Yeah, gosh, that's great. That really is. I really have enjoyed a lot of the episodes. I haven't gotten to all of them, but the ones that I've listened to, I think you do a great job with the people that it's very, it's very conversational. You do a great job at getting them to answer the questions, but not in kind of like we talked about before. It's not in a scripted way. You do a good job of a conversation with them.
I think you learn with these things, because there have been some that were scripted, and so we're like, okay, we're not having scripts anymore.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely something you learn as you go, for certain. Yeah. So when you tell me where you see, first I want to go back. During COVID and this whole pandemic, where did that take the podcast, and where did it feel as the community, and how did that change your podcast and stuff?
So it didn't affect me directly. I've actually worked from home for a long time now, at about 15 years, something like that. So I worked all through the pandemic. We had a system called furlough in this country. I don't know where that word came from, but it was used specifically for the pandemic. People basically could keep their job, and then they were sort of paid by the government. Right. So to keep people away from work. So my wife was at home, my kids were at home, their schools were shut. It was a glorious summer, the first summer of the pandemic in the UK. It was lovely. And they were basically all spending time in the garden. I carried on working because I worked from home anyway, so I'm sitting in my office. I'm like, no one else was working. I'm sitting here working. Right. So the podcast wasn't really affected because it was all done remotely. I've literally done one episode live where we actually did it face to face at a conference. But other than that, it's all been remotely anyway. So that was all fine. People got more used to using Zoom, so that actually became easier because everyone knew what Zoom was and used it all the time. For sure. And people were around at their homes, so that it was easier to schedule. So actually it became easier in many ways. And I think viewer or listener numbers went up because people again were consuming online content. They weren't meeting anyone. And so actually it probably benefited to sort of release at that sort of time. Yeah, I agree. The only thing we still do is there's sort of advice to try and stick to around about half an hour. Yeah. Because that's the average time it takes people to commute to work. Right, exactly. It's like half people aren't commuting to work anymore. Right, exactly. Yeah, it is a weird time because you can go a little bit longer, but then you got to be careful that it's not too long. So it is a tricky thing to get that perfect time. Yeah, we've split some episodes, so it did. Yeah. Just like I don't really want to stop this now, so we did it. Okay, we'll break that into we'll run it a little bit longer and then do it as part two, part one. So you do exactly. Part one and part two just seems to work better. So then now you're doing the podcast. So give me one of your favorite stories, or one story that you can think about that was the most touching to you, that you think about that like, wow, because I could think right now I'm on number 50 something, and I could think of the ones that were really, really affected me, that were just really touching. So there's a few different types. Well, the thing I get most out of it is that I get to speak to some of the top experts in the world, and that's brilliant. And some of them, I know I can just email them directly, that I've had enough relationship with them, and that's really, really useful. So as a person, I do it to give back, but actually I also have learned huge amounts from it, because obviously I listen to everyone because I'm doing it, so I find out all this information. So that's been really, really handy. But there's been some funny episodes. The funniest one I have recounted on one of our podcast episodes is actually with Professor Jelinek, who came up with the Overcoming MS program.
Okay.
One of the first episodes we did was with him because it's promoting the program that he invented, and he's got a couple of dogs, and the dogs during the interview went ballistic when someone came to the door. So there's barking, and I'm like, okay, well, it's okay, we can cut, and we can read, and we have to redo that question, and we have to do, and they did it again. I was like, okay. So there's a lot of editing to do afterwards. It was fine. The episode went out, and there was no dog noises, but it was a lot of it was a lot of me editing it afterwards, so we didn't hear that. So then years later, he's then retired as a medical doctor, and he was head of neuroepidemiology at the University of Melbourne, or the Melbourne Medical School or something.
Right.
Basically, it was actually his wife is also a professor there, and she actually took over.
I didn't know that
role.
Okay.
So she goes under her maiden name, so she's called Sandra Neat professionally. And so because she was taking over, and they still study things like lifestyle effects on things like MS.
Sure.
And so I interviewed her, and she was sitting in her bedroom, and I could see her on the camera, and the dogs are sitting behind her. I was like,
no.
Are they the same dogs? And she said, yeah. And I said, they were a bit of a problem last time. She said, don't worry, they'll be absolutely fine. And honestly, those were the best behaved dogs I've ever seen. So I was like, okay.
It's just him.
the alpha dog in that household is not Professor Jelinek. It's obviously his wife, Sandra Neat.
That's
funny. Were best behaved dogs. So that was quite funny.
Yeah, that is funny. I love
and
that.
then, touching ones, I think things like, I've definitely come to realise much more inclusivity for people with different abilities, and realising that actually people in wheelchairs, I initially saw that as I must not, get worse, and I must keep my mobility.
Sure.
And then you realise actually there's people in wheelchairs who are having fantastic lives, and and that's really made me opened my eyes, thinking actually, I think I'm much more would campaign for the rights for people who have accessibility problems. And if you go to maybe you're primary progressive, or maybe just you've had MS for a long time, or you're just unlucky or whatever, then you can end up in a wheelchair, but it's not the end of the world, and you can have a fantastic life, and people are doing amazing stuff who are wheelchair bound, and which actually I don't like that term, wheelchair bound, but anyway. But
Heidi, I'm gonna have you get off for just a couple minutes, okay?
Okay,
thanks. So go ahead and sign off your computer, Heidi.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I missed.
No, it's okay. Okay. That's my client. 15 minutes.
Good. All right. Sorry. A good break point would be, what was I starting on? So, okay. So some things I've learned probably would be, or touching stories would be really I think more inclusivity. So when I started on my sort of MS journey, I think I was terrified of being in a wheelchair, but just interviewing people who are in a wheelchair, they're just they can be so optimistic, and I don't fear it anymore. I just think, well, people, maybe they've got primary progressive MS, or they've just had MS for a long time, or they're unlucky.
Sure.
But there's a guy, Mark Webb, he does wheelchair rugby, and there's other people, and they're just okay, they might have had to adapt their house somewhat, but they're still okay, I can still go travelling, and I can still do this, and and I think increasingly aware of that we need to make everything as accessible as possible, because they're all people, and they're and it's just and they haven't given up on life. They're not they're not doing MS worse than anyone else. They haven't failed on their medication or not eaten the right diet or whatever. They're probably doing all those things as well as everyone else. They just, for whatever reason, But for whatever reason, we've got MS, and someone else
Exactly.
who's living the worst life, who's eating the worst food, smoking 100 cigarettes a day,
Right.
doing no exercise whatsoever,
Yes.
and both whose parents had MS or something,
Right.
still might not have MS just by chance,
Exactly.
and it's just luck.
Right.
So, I just think, that's increased. It's really opened my eyes, I think, to
Yeah.
that we're everything's by chance. And
Yeah. I think that's great, Geoff. I love the way that you said that because, as we're fighting for the rights of our disabled, and that's what we advocate for, I think that so many people look at us, and then once we're in a wheelchair, it's like kind of like we're in the way. But I think doing the podcast for sure has opened my eyes that so many of my clients, even in wheelchairs, are the clients that work the hardest. And like you said, are the clients that eat the best. And my clients that a lot of the clients that are moving well will give me the most trouble, but the clients that are in the wheelchairs will do the best work. And I just so appreciate their attitudes, the way that they tackle life with, like you said, a positive attitude. They're not in their wheelchair like, woe is me. They're actually like really, really desiring to make the most out of their life.
And I think you can take it two ways. So I've got a mobility scooter because I want to be able to go. I primarily got it because I'm going on holiday this summer with my family, and I want to be able to walk around with them all day long. And I know in the heat of summer in the Mediterranean that would not be happening. So I want to be able to do that and not change what they're doing so much. So I can go around a mobility scooter. We can go walking for 5-10 miles, which I wouldn't have been able to do.
Okay.
Especially in heat. There's no way. I've been, it would have tired me out and wiped me out. And so that acceptance, I'm not now worried about accepting that. But on the other hand, what I don't want to do, which I've seen some people do, is go straight for, I'm going to get the top of the range electric wheelchair because I can get funding from here. And it's like,
right.
Yeah, but you can still walk. And I'm
Right.
like, I want to try to do as much exercise as I possibly can.
Sure.
So I have a mobility scooter, but then I will try to avoid using it. So I see no shame in using it on the one hand, but equally, I think you've got to try to do as much as you can,
Yes.
be as active as you can be.
I like that. So then in place of that, will you use like tracking poles? Is that something that, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So
like,
I
I
very
got
regularly
those.
use. Yeah. I mean,
That was tough.
Yeah.
But I was like, no, like there are times when I've done too much, I've done too much in the day and I need to go with my puppy later. And it's like, no, I do need this and it's okay.
Yeah.
But
I mean, there's the first time you fall over, you think, oh, wow, that's bad. After a
Right.
few times, you think, okay,
right.
I might need something to.
After bruises and broken toes, you're like, okay, let's not be stupid.
Yeah.
So no, I absolutely agree. So where do you see, a couple of last questions I want to ask you, Geoff, is where do you see the podcast going in the next couple of years? Where do you see you moving into?
So there have been some changes in that we started with the core podcast, which is Living Well with MS. So the Living Well with MS is the main Overcoming MS podcast, and then we added to that, and we now have a specific diet one called Ask Jack, where we have a professional chef who has MS who gives specific diet advice and cooking advice. Yes. And so that's an extra one. And then we also have another one called Coffee Break Series, which is just for people with MS. So rather than experts, we're talking to just normal people and just about their experiences and how they deal with it. And particularly if it's sort of someone newly diagnosed, how, what sort of diagnosis,
right.
what advice they'd give someone newly diagnosed, things like that. So there's sort of 3 sort of series running. So I don't think we'll add to it. There's always that trying to get the top experts.
Yeah.
Trying to get there's some amazing people who are connected.
Gosh, yeah.
I mean, if Michelle Obama's listening to this, she's number one because her mother, I think, had MS.
Yeah, I believe so.
So, to be honest, I don't think she actually has more of a story to tell than anyone else's mother had MS, but she is Michelle Obama. So
right.
She's probably up there quite high.
I'm going to say you probably have a better chance of getting her right now than I do. So
Yeah, but I think I probably have a better chance of getting the Pope. So I think it's pretty unlikely.
Probably
But,
right now.
so there's a few people that are like, okay, yeah, and Selma Blair, isn't it? Who, yeah,
Yeah,
like those
yeah.
are very unlikely people to
Right.
get. I mean, it's interesting. Someone, how
Yeah.
does it affect somebody who's really, really famous? And that must be quite
Sure.
different. And just because they're really, really famous.
I feel like I just get so nervous. I'd be like, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, yeah. And then it's just like it's just trying to get the sort of top people in each field, and we're just trying to theme it a bit more now to try and say, okay, let's have a month of exercise, and then we'll have a month that, and we've spoken to really interesting people. I mean, Matt Imbury, I think he's filming his second edition of his film.
Yes.
So hopefully speak to him again and get getting returning people. I think before we were just trying to get different people. It's actually quite interesting to say, actually, no, let's, they've got a lot more to say. So get some people back.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's really good, Geoff, because I think sometimes we leave it and then, they've done all this stuff, and it's really good to get them back and say like, okay, like now, how did this go? Where are you at now? So I think it's, to your point, I think that's really good.
Yeah, and if you're speaking to an absolute expert, who is trying to take all their life's expertise and tell you it in 40 minutes,
right?
Pretty unlikely you're going to get everything. So
exactly,
a lot more to say,
right?
And there's other things like fasting's a big. There's where we're going from here. So I think most people now accept that living a healthy life.
Right.
The specifics of that is up for a debate, but certainly having a healthy lifestyle where you're eating a whole food diet. Maybe whether it's with or without meat, but certainly reducing processed food, much more whole food, keeping up your fruit and vegetable intake, looking after your stress and mental health. Vitamin D, I think, is pretty much a given that people should have access to the sun or more vitamin D.
Right.
So all those sort of standard things, I think, are pretty accepted now. But sort of just what's next might be one of the big things. I think might be fasting. So the more, getting some more in, I think talking to people. We've talked to a guy called Valter Longo, who was one of the originators of sort of modern day fasting.
Intermittent fasting, yes.
And getting some more other experts in to talk about fasting would be interesting.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I do that as well. And I find great success with that. But I also have rheumatoid with the MS. I know we talked about that before. And so with that, I can't treat the rheumatoid as much. But boy, oh boy, does it help with the MS and the rheumatoid, with the inflammation and all that.
And I think those sort of things are connected. Arthritis is another autoimmune condition. There's something that's gone wrong and your body's attacking itself.
Yeah. All the fun with it, right?
Yeah.
Just never stops. All the fun. So where are you guys at now in overcoming MS as far as the podcast? You guys are pretty high up there. You're like number, I don't want to misquote it.
What, for multiple sclerosis podcasts? We're the most popular.
Yeah,
if you put it on iTunes. I mean, I haven't checked all the others, but I mean, iTunes is the biggest platform. But if you search for multiple sclerosis, then you'll find other episodes individual episodes, which are, but in terms of series, we would be the most popular.
Well, you're already number one, but to listeners who have not heard you and have not listened, I just encourage you to turn on Apple, or you guys are on Spotify as well.
Yeah, we're on Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, on the Overcoming MS website. Yeah, everywhere. If you put in Living Well with MS, then you'll find it.
Put it on and take a listen. Very good content. Lots of, like we talked about, lots of the top educators and professors in their field, and some, you might even hear me soon. So,
I don't know which will come out first.
Yeah, I don't know.
There will be.
But definitely really enjoyed talking to you today, Geoff. Thanks so much for giving us some more look into some of the other MS podcasts and just how we're really working together to bring advocacy and to bring more awareness to this disease that people still don't know that much about. So I appreciate what you do and how you're bringing more awareness.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Have a great day. And for all of you guys, thank you so much and enjoy this edition and give us a rating. Don't forget to subscribe and can't wait to see you guys next week. Have a great day, guys.